My beloved sons and daughters in Christ, before you move on, there's something important you need to hear. Something most people never hear because the modern world has become very skilled at distracting us from the realities that matter most. Over the years, I have spent an extraordinary amount of time studying theology, spiritual warfare, human behavior, and the hidden patterns that shape our culture. I have listened to countless stories, witnessed suffering up close, and examined truths that many people would rather ignore. What I'm about to share is not designed to entertain you, impress you, or give you a temporary emotional reaction. It is meant to wake you up, because there are realities affecting your life right now that most people never stop to consider. Every day I hear from people who are confused, afraid, overwhelmed, and searching for answers. Many of them sense that something is deeply wrong in the world, yet they cannot explain exactly what it is. They feel pressure in their families, tension in their minds, division in their communities, and a growing sense that the culture around them is moving further away from truth. What makes this moment unique is that these problems are not isolated events. They are connected. They are part of a larger spiritual struggle that has been unfolding for generations. We are living through a critical period in history. The forces that oppose truth, virtue, and faith are no longer hiding in the shadows. They are operating openly through institutions, media, entertainment, education, and even within the structures that were once meant to protect society. Families are breaking apart. Moral clarity is disappearing. Confusion is being celebrated as wisdom. Many people who should be speaking boldly have chosen silence instead. Yet silence has never solved a crisis. That is why this conversation matters. What I want to discuss involves three realities that many people never fully understand: the spiritual weapon that has been weakened and neglected in modern society, the invisible battle taking place inside every human soul, and the reason the next few years may have enormous consequences, not only for individuals, but for entire families and future generations. This is not merely information. It is a warning and an invitation to take your spiritual life seriously before it becomes too late to ignore. The first thing we must understand is something even many sincere believers struggle to grasp. We are at war, not a symbolic war, not simply a political disagreement, not merely a clash of ideas that can be solved through elections, policies, or public debates. We are engaged in a real spiritual conflict. It is happening right now whether people recognize it or not. Every soul is involved. Every family is involved. Every marriage, every child, every individual decision is connected to this larger battle. The most dangerous part of this conflict is not how powerful it is. The most dangerous part is how invisible it has become to the average person. Most people wake up, go through their routines, and never realize that influences are constantly shaping their thoughts, choices, desires, and beliefs. The great spiritual thinkers throughout Christian history understood this clearly. They recognized that life is not merely physical. Human beings exist within a spiritual reality that affects everything they do. One of the greatest mistakes of the modern age has been reducing evil to an abstract concept. Many people treat it as nothing more than a metaphor, a psychological condition, or a social problem. But the traditional Christian understanding has always been different. Evil is personal. It is intelligent. It seeks destruction. The spiritual enemy of mankind is not a fictional character designed to entertain children, nor is he a symbol created to explain bad behavior. He is understood within Christian theology as a fallen angel whose purpose is to separate human beings from God. That mission has never changed. And contrary to what many assume, his greatest efforts are not directed toward those who have already abandoned faith entirely. The most determined attacks are often aimed at those who are striving to move closer to God. Those souls matter. Those lives matter. Those victories matter. To understand this conflict, you must understand the areas where the battle takes place. The first battlefield is the intellect. This includes what you believe, how you interpret reality, and how you determine what is true or false. The second battlefield is the will. This is your ability to choose what is right, resist temptation, remain disciplined, and follow through on commitments even when they become difficult. The third battlefield is the emotional life. This includes fears, desires, attachments, frustrations, and feelings. The struggle operates across all three at the same time. On the level of the intellect, modern society has spent generations attacking the idea of objective truth. Through education, media, entertainment, and cultural messaging, people have increasingly been taught that truth is relative and that moral standards are merely personal preferences. As a result, many individuals no longer possess a stable framework for distinguishing good from evil. They have become vulnerable because they no longer believe certainty is possible. On the battlefield of the will, the challenge looks different but is equally serious. We live in a culture built around comfort, convenience, and immediate gratification. Every inconvenience is treated as a problem to eliminate. Every desire demands instant satisfaction. Over time, this weakens the human capacity for discipline. People struggle to fast, struggle to pray consistently, struggle to endure hardship, and struggle to resist temptation. The will functions much like a muscle. If it is never exercised, it gradually loses strength. Modern culture has made comfort so accessible that many people have forgotten how to develop resilience, sacrifice, and self-mastery. This weakening of the will creates enormous spiritual vulnerability. Then there is the emotional battlefield, which may be the most significant area of struggle in our current age. Entire generations have been trained to believe that emotions should determine reality. If something feels good, it is assumed to be right. If something feels uncomfortable, it is assumed to be wrong. Emotional discomfort has become the enemy, while emotional satisfaction has become the highest goal. This way of thinking leaves people trapped by their feelings and unable to make decisions based on truth, wisdom, or virtue. What makes this especially dangerous is that it does not happen accidentally. It develops gradually through cultural influences, technology, family dysfunction, and repeated messaging that shapes how people understand themselves. The reason these ideas are reaching so many people today is not because they are revolutionary. In fact, they are ancient. The truths that are resonating with people are truths that have existed for centuries but have largely been forgotten. Deep down, many people recognize them immediately because they correspond with realities they have already experienced in their own lives. Human struggles with temptation, fear, anger, envy, despair, pride, and other destructive tendencies are not simply psychological challenges. They also have a spiritual dimension. Ignoring that dimension leaves people fighting battles with incomplete tools. For generations, society has encouraged people to seek solutions everywhere, except within the spiritual tradition that preserved answers for centuries. Yet the resources have never disappeared. They remain available through prayer, sacramental life, spiritual discipline, the wisdom of the saints, and the teachings that have been passed down through generations. The real issue is not whether these tools exist. The issue is whether people are willing to use them. Every battle requires preparation, awareness, and action. No one accidentally drifts toward holiness. No one sleepwalks into spiritual victory. The reality is simple. The struggle is already underway. The stakes are real. Everyday choices are being made that shape eternal outcomes. Whether people acknowledge it or not, the conflict has already begun. The only question that remains is whether they will wake up in time to recognize it. Now consider this carefully. If someone wanted to weaken a civilization from within over the course of several generations, where would they begin? Most people assume the first targets would be churches, schools, religious leaders, or cultural institutions. But history suggests something different. Institutions can be rebuilt, buildings can be restored, leaders can be replaced. The most effective place to strike is the family itself, and more specifically, the role of the father. After years of working with individuals facing profound spiritual struggles, family crises, emotional wounds, and deep personal suffering, a pattern becomes impossible to ignore. Again and again, one common thread appears. In many cases, there is a father who is absent, disengaged, emotionally unavailable, spiritually passive, or unable to provide the guidance that children needed during their formative years. This observation is not about blaming fathers for every problem. It is about recognizing how essential their role truly is. A father's influence extends far beyond providing financially. His presence shapes identity, stability, discipline, security, and spiritual formation in ways that cannot easily be replaced. A healthy father is not merely a man who occupies space in a household. He is someone who accepts responsibility for the well-being of those entrusted to him. He teaches by example. He demonstrates integrity, sacrifice, self-control, and faithfulness. He provides correction when necessary and encouragement when needed. He helps his children understand right from wrong. He models courage during hardship and humility during success. Yet over the last several decades, the cultural image of fatherhood has undergone a dramatic transformation. Popular entertainment, advertising, and social commentary have repeatedly portrayed fathers in one of two ways. Either they are presented as incompetent figures who cannot be trusted with responsibility, or they are depicted as oppressive authorities whose influence must be resisted. Rarely are they shown as wise, capable leaders whose presence strengthens families. When an entire culture consistently undermines a role, future generations eventually lose confidence in that role altogether. The consequences become visible over time. Many young men grow up without ever witnessing fatherhood in practice. They are expected to become strong husbands and fathers someday, yet they were never shown how. They enter adulthood carrying uncertainty about masculinity, leadership, commitment, and responsibility because the examples available to them were incomplete or distorted. As a result, confusion spreads from one generation to the next. Families struggle, marriages weaken, children search elsewhere for guidance and identity. What often appears to be a collection of unrelated social problems can frequently be traced back to this deeper breakdown. When foundational structures weaken, everything built upon them becomes unstable. Throughout history, many societies understood that fathers carried a unique responsibility within the home. They were not only providers and protectors, but also moral and spiritual leaders. Their actions affected the atmosphere of the entire household. Ancient cultures recognized that the health of a family depended largely upon the character of those leading it. Christian teaching reinforces this idea repeatedly, emphasizing that parents are entrusted with the formation of their children. This responsibility extends beyond education, athletics, achievements, or financial success. The deepest responsibility concerns the development of the soul. A parent may help a child achieve many worldly accomplishments, but if spiritual formation is neglected, something essential has been lost. Over the last half century, numerous forces have contributed to weakening this foundation. Rising divorce rates separated many fathers from their children during critical developmental years. The widespread availability of pornography created a powerful distortion of relationships, intimacy, and self-sacrifice. Cultural ideologies often challenge the complementary nature of masculinity and femininity, creating confusion about the unique contributions of both men and women. While affirming the dignity of women is unquestionably important, many discussions move beyond equality and toward the rejection of meaningful distinctions altogether. The result was not harmony but confusion. When society becomes uncertain about what men are supposed to be, many men become uncertain about it as well. Look around many faith communities today, and a noticeable pattern emerges. In numerous places, women remain highly involved, while younger men are often absent or disengaged. This absence raises important questions. Why have so many young men drifted away from faith, responsibility, and spiritual formation? Why do so many feel disconnected from purpose? Part of the answer may be that they were never given a compelling vision of what authentic manhood looks like. They were told what not to be, but rarely shown what they should become. When identity is built primarily through criticism rather than formation, confusion naturally follows. Yet despite these challenges, there are reasons for hope. In recent years, many young men have begun searching for something deeper. They recognize that the promises offered by modern culture have not produced fulfillment. They have been told that commitment limits freedom, that sacrifice is unnecessary, that authority is inherently oppressive, and that fatherhood is optional. Yet many discover through experience that these messages leave them dissatisfied. Deep within human nature exists a desire for purpose, responsibility, and meaning. No amount of cultural conditioning can completely erase that reality. Eventually, people begin asking difficult questions. They start searching for stronger foundations. They seek guidance, mentorship, and truth. This growing hunger is visible in conversations taking place across communities, churches, families, and online spaces. Young fathers are seeking advice about how to lead their homes. Young husbands are searching for examples of commitment and virtue. Men who never received guidance are looking for someone willing to provide it. They want clarity. They want direction. They want a vision of masculinity that is neither abusive nor passive, neither domineering nor weak. They want to know how to become the men they sense they were created to be. The encouraging reality is that such a vision still exists. It has not disappeared. It simply needs to be rediscovered and lived. Change always begins with individuals. Entire generations can be influenced when a single person decides to break destructive cycles. A man who chooses discipline instead of complacency. A father who decides to become emotionally present. A husband who commits himself to growth. A parent who prioritizes prayer, virtue, and family life. These choices may appear small at first, but their impact extends far beyond one lifetime. Children learn from what they observe. Families are shaped by consistent examples. Communities change when enough individuals decide to live differently. There is another lesson that emerges repeatedly when examining human suffering and spiritual struggle. People often underestimate the power of wounds carried from the past. Behind many ongoing battles lie unresolved injuries that continue influencing thoughts, emotions, relationships, and decisions. These wounds may come from childhood experiences, family dysfunction, betrayal, rejection, neglect, trauma, or personal failures. While many individuals attempt to ignore these experiences, unaddressed wounds rarely disappear on their own. Instead, they remain beneath the surface, shaping behavior in subtle ways that often go unnoticed. One of the most striking realities observed through years of pastoral work is how accurately these hidden wounds influence a person's vulnerabilities. Individuals frequently believe they understand the source of their struggles, only to discover that deeper issues remain unresolved. Fear may be rooted in rejection, anger may be rooted in betrayal, shame may be rooted in experiences long buried beneath conscious awareness. Until these wounds are acknowledged and brought into the light, they continue affecting every area of life. Healing requires honesty. It requires confronting painful realities rather than pretending they do not exist. Many people imagine spiritual battles as external conflicts involving obvious temptations or dramatic events. In reality, the deepest struggles often occur internally. They emerge through emotional wounds, unhealthy attachments, distorted beliefs, and unresolved pain. These internal weaknesses become points of vulnerability through which fear, discouragement, resentment, and despair gain influence. This is why healing is not merely about removing symptoms. True healing requires transformation at a deeper level. It requires addressing the underlying wound itself, rather than simply managing its consequences. Consider the example of someone who endured significant emotional or physical abuse during childhood. Such experiences leave scars. If those scars remain untreated, they influence relationships, self-worth, trust, and decision-making. Over time, unresolved pain can shape an entire personality. A person may spend decades reacting to wounds they barely understand. Healing begins when those experiences are acknowledged and brought before God with honesty and humility. Freedom becomes possible when old injuries no longer define identity. Transformation occurs when pain loses its power to control the future. This process is neither quick nor easy. Genuine healing requires grace, effort, honesty, and perseverance. It involves confronting painful truths, abandoning destructive habits, and embracing healthier ways of living. Yet countless people have experienced remarkable change when they commit themselves to that journey. The wounds of the past do not have to dictate the future. The cycles that shaped previous generations do not have to continue indefinitely. Freedom remains possible. Restoration remains possible. And often it begins with a simple decision to stop running from the truth and start confronting it with courage. One of the most important distinctions that people often miss is the difference between acknowledging human suffering and understanding its deeper dimensions. Not every emotional struggle, mental health challenge, or personal difficulty has a spiritual cause. Human beings are complex. We have physical needs, psychological needs, emotional needs, and spiritual needs. Authentic healing often requires addressing all of them together, rather than isolating one from the others. Professional counseling, medical treatment, supportive relationships, and practical assistance can all play an important role in recovery. At the same time, reducing every human struggle to purely natural explanations can leave people overlooking realities that are equally important. Human beings were created for more than physical existence alone, and any approach that ignores the spiritual dimension will ultimately remain incomplete. Over the years, countless individuals have discovered that true transformation often begins when they reconnect with the spiritual resources available to them. Prayer, repentance, self-examination, worship, and sacramental life have provided strength and healing to generations of believers. These practices are not merely traditions preserved out of habit. They exist because they address fundamental realities of the human condition. People carry guilt. People carry shame. People carry burdens they cannot remove on their own. They need forgiveness, healing, guidance, and hope. Throughout history, faith communities have served as places where individuals could encounter those gifts in a profound way. Among the most powerful lessons learned from years of pastoral ministry is that the people who suffer most deeply are rarely the people society labels as villains. More often, they are wounded individuals carrying burdens they were never equipped to handle. They may have been failed by parents, neglected by mentors, betrayed by friends, abandoned by institutions, or misled by a culture that promised fulfillment while delivering emptiness. Beneath anger, there is often pain. Beneath addiction, there is often loneliness. Beneath destructive behavior, there is often a wound crying out for healing. Once people encounter genuine truth combined with genuine compassion, remarkable changes can occur. What appeared impossible suddenly becomes possible. What seemed permanent begins to fade. Lives can change dramatically when they finally encounter the truth they have been searching for. This brings us to another issue that deserves honest discussion. Many people sense that something has changed within religious institutions over recent decades. They notice a growing hesitation to speak clearly about difficult topics. They observe uncertainty where confidence once existed and caution where courage was expected. This concern is not about questioning the truth of the faith itself. The core teachings remain intact. The problem lies elsewhere. It lies in the tendency to avoid uncomfortable conversations out of fear of criticism, controversy, or public backlash. Over time, this avoidance creates consequences that extend far beyond individual leaders. Many believers cannot remember the last time they heard a serious challenge from a pulpit regarding personal conversion, moral responsibility, sacrifice, self-discipline, confession, or the consequences of persistent sin. Messages often focus exclusively on comfort, affirmation, and encouragement. While encouragement is important, it becomes incomplete when disconnected from truth. Genuine love does not simply affirm people where they are. Genuine love also calls them toward growth. It invites transformation. It challenges destructive patterns and points towards something better. A message that comforts without challenging can become as incomplete as a message that challenges without compassion. Throughout history, spiritual leaders were expected to speak honestly about difficult realities. They addressed topics that people did not necessarily want to hear because they understood the stakes involved. They recognized that silence carries consequences. When important truths remain unspoken, confusion fills the void. Individuals spend years believing harmful behaviors are insignificant because nobody explained otherwise. They may drift further from the life they were called to live, simply because no one was willing to provide clear guidance. Over time, entire communities can become spiritually weakened when clarity is replaced with ambiguity. At the same time, criticism alone is not the answer. It is important to distinguish between loving concern and destructive cynicism. Institutions are composed of human beings, and human beings are imperfect. Every generation faces its own challenges and failures. The solution is not abandonment, the solution is renewal. Faith communities remain essential because they provide resources that individuals cannot fully access alone. They offer wisdom, accountability, fellowship, guidance, and sacramental life. What is needed is not despair but courage. Courage among leaders to speak clearly. Courage among believers to pursue truth sincerely. Courage among communities to prioritize spiritual growth over popularity. Perhaps the greatest mistake people make is assuming that responsibility belongs entirely to someone else. They wait for leaders to solve problems, institutions to improve, or cultural conditions to change. Meanwhile, they neglect their own personal formation. Yet every individual remains responsible for his or her own response to grace, truth, and opportunity. No one will be able to point to the failures of others as an excuse for neglecting personal growth. Difficult circumstances may explain challenges, but they do not eliminate responsibility. Each person must decide whether to pursue holiness, wisdom, and virtue, regardless of what others choose to do. This brings us to a practical question that many people ask. How do destructive influences gain greater control over a person's life? Why do some individuals seem trapped in cycles they cannot escape? While every situation is unique, several common patterns appear repeatedly. Understanding these patterns is important because awareness is often the first step toward freedom. The first and perhaps most significant pattern involves persistent, serious sin. Many people misunderstand the nature of sin, viewing it merely as breaking rules or failing to meet moral expectations. In reality, sin damages the relationship between the human person and God. It creates wounds that affect thoughts, desires, relationships, and spiritual sensitivity. A single failure does not define a person. Human beings stumble, they make mistakes, they fall short. What matters is the response. A person who recognizes wrongdoing, seeks forgiveness, and sincerely strives to change opens the door to healing and restoration. The greater danger emerges when someone knowingly embraces destructive behavior and continues without repentance. Over time, repeated choices shape character. Habits become stronger, resistance becomes weaker. What once felt wrong begins to feel normal. Gradually, the ability to recognize spiritual danger becomes diminished. This process rarely happens overnight. It develops through countless small decisions that accumulate over time. Regular self-examination and sincere repentance interrupt this process. They function like spiritual medicine, addressing wounds before they deepen. Just as physical health requires ongoing care rather than occasional attention, spiritual health requires consistency. Waiting till problems become overwhelming makes recovery far more difficult. People who regularly examine their lives, seek forgiveness, and make corrections often avoid crises that might otherwise have become devastating. Prevention remains far easier than repair. Another significant area of concern involves practices that open individuals to influences they do not fully understand. Throughout history, religious traditions have consistently warned against attempts to manipulate hidden spiritual powers for personal gain, knowledge, control, or guidance. Practices involving occult systems, fortune telling, divination, spirit communication and similar activities have repeatedly been identified as spiritually dangerous. Yet many people approach them casually, viewing them as entertainment or harmless curiosity. What begins as curiosity can sometimes lead individuals into areas they neither understand nor control. The appeal of such practices is understandable. Human beings naturally desire certainty about the future. They seek answers to difficult questions. They long for guidance during uncertain times. However, the pursuit of hidden knowledge outside appropriate spiritual boundaries often creates confusion rather than clarity. Instead of bringing peace, it can increase fear, dependency, and spiritual instability. History is filled with warnings about these dangers, not because people wish to limit freedom, but because experience repeatedly demonstrated the consequences of ignoring them. Many individuals who became involved in occult practices initially believed they were engaging in something harmless. Some were searching for comfort, others were looking for direction. Some simply followed trends without considering deeper implications. Yet after becoming involved, many reported increased anxiety, fear, confusion, or spiritual distress. Whether one interprets these experiences through theological or psychological frameworks, the pattern itself remains significant. Actions carry consequences, and certain doors are easier to open than they are to close. For this reason, wisdom requires caution. Not everything that appears spiritually interesting is spiritually beneficial. Not every path promising enlightenment leads toward truth. Discernment remains essential in an age where countless voices compete for attention. Individuals who desire genuine peace must be willing to evaluate influences carefully rather than accepting them uncritically. The search for meaning is natural, but it must be directed towards sources that promote truth, healing, and authentic freedom rather than confusion and dependency. Ultimately, every person must decide which influences they will welcome into their life. Every choice either strengthens or weakens spiritual resilience. Every habit shapes character. Every repeated action moves a person toward greater freedom or greater bondage. Understanding these realities does not require fear. It requires awareness. Awareness creates opportunity, and opportunity creates the possibility for lasting change. There is one more doorway that deserves serious attention because it is both extremely common and often overlooked. It does not involve unusual practices, dramatic experiences, or obvious moral failures. In fact, many respectable and outwardly successful people struggle with it for years without recognizing its impact. That doorway is unforgiveness. Of all the burdens people carry, unresolved resentment may be one of the heaviest. It quietly influences thoughts, relationships, emotions, and even spiritual growth. Many people convince themselves they have moved on from a painful experience, only to discover that the wound still shapes how they view the world. The memory remains active, the anger remains alive, the offense continues occupying space within their heart long after the original event has passed. What makes unforgiveness so powerful is that it often disguises itself as justice. People tell themselves they are simply remembering what happened. They believe they are protecting themselves from future harm. They feel that releasing the offense would somehow excuse the wrongdoing or minimize the pain they experienced. Yet forgiveness does not mean pretending evil never occurred. It does not require denying the seriousness of the wound. It does not demand immediate reconciliation with someone who remains dangerous or untrustworthy. Forgiveness is something deeper. It is the deliberate decision to stop allowing another person's actions to control your future. It is the choice to release the debt that anger keeps collecting. It is an act of freedom. Many individuals remain emotionally trapped because they continue replaying old injuries. They revisit painful conversations. They rehearse betrayals. They mentally relive moments of rejection, humiliation, abandonment, or injustice. Each repetition strengthens the wound rather than healing it. Over time, bitterness becomes familiar. The pain becomes part of their identity. They may not even realize how much energy is being consumed by resentment until they finally let it go. When forgiveness occurs, not merely as a feeling but as a conscious act of the will, the change can be profound. People often describe experiencing a sense of relief they never thought possible. A burden they carried for years suddenly begins to lift. This does not mean forgiveness is easy. Some wounds are incredibly deep. Some betrayals leave scars that last a lifetime. There are people who suffered abuse, neglect, abandonment, deception, or cruelty that should never have happened. The path toward forgiveness may take time. It may involve prayer, counseling, guidance, and repeated decisions to release the offense. Yet despite the difficulty, countless individuals have discovered that forgiveness ultimately benefits the wounded person far more than the offender. Refusing to forgive keeps the injury alive. Choosing forgiveness begins the process of reclaiming freedom. When serious sin, harmful spiritual influences, and unforgiveness combine, they create patterns that can affect an entire life. The encouraging news is that no situation is beyond hope. No mistake is too great. No history is too complicated. No wound is too deep for healing to begin. Throughout years of ministry, counseling, and personal transformation, people have repeatedly demonstrated that change is possible. Individuals trapped in destructive cycles found freedom. Families on the verge of collapse experienced restoration. People who believed they were permanently broken discovered renewed purpose. These stories are not rare exceptions. They are reminders of what becomes possible when truth is embraced and healing is pursued with sincerity. As we look ahead, however, it becomes increasingly clear that the challenges facing modern society are accelerating. Many people sense this instinctively. They observe growing division, confusion, instability, and uncertainty. Institutions once viewed as reliable no longer inspire the same confidence. Cultural standards shift rapidly. Moral frameworks that guided previous generations are questioned or discarded. Communities become fragmented. Trust declines, anxiety rises. While every generation faces difficulties, there is a growing sense that current pressures are converging in unusual ways. The pace of change alone is enough to leave many people feeling overwhelmed. Predicting the future with certainty is impossible. History rarely unfolds exactly as expected, yet patterns can still be observed. When moral confusion increases, social instability often follows. When truth becomes negotiable, trust becomes fragile. When families weaken, communities struggle. When spiritual foundations erode, people search desperately for substitutes. Many of the problems visible today did not appear suddenly. They developed gradually over decades. What we are witnessing now may simply be the consequences becoming more difficult to ignore. For this reason, the coming years will likely reveal important distinctions between superficial belief and deeply rooted conviction. Challenges have a way of exposing foundations. When conditions are comfortable, almost any structure appears strong. Difficulty reveals what was built on solid ground and what was built on unstable foundations. Individuals who have cultivated faith, discipline, prayer, integrity, and resilience often discover that these habits provide strength during uncertainty. Those who neglected those foundations may find themselves searching for stability at precisely the moment they need it most. The encouraging reality is that authentic stability remains available. It does not depend on political movements, cultural trends, economic conditions, or public approval. Throughout history, people endured wars, persecution, social upheaval, and personal tragedy while maintaining hope because their lives rested on something deeper than circumstances. They understood that external conditions change constantly, but truth remains constant. Faith remains constant. Character remains constant. These realities provide an anchor when everything else feels unstable. This leads naturally to an important question. What practical steps should someone take right now? Not next year. Not when life becomes more convenient. Not after circumstances improve. What can be done immediately? The first step is honest self-examination. Take an unflinching look at your life. Are there habits, attitudes, relationships, or choices pulling you away from the person you are called to become? Are there areas where you have compromised values you once considered important? Awareness is essential because transformation cannot occur until reality is acknowledged. The second step is reconciliation. Wherever possible, seek peace with God and with others. Address unresolved issues rather than postponing them indefinitely. Repair damaged relationships when appropriate. Seek forgiveness where forgiveness is needed. Offer forgiveness where forgiveness has been withheld. These actions require humility, but humility often becomes the doorway to healing. Pride protects wounds. Humility allows them to be treated. The third step involves establishing a disciplined spiritual life. Consistency matters far more than intensity. Many people wait for extraordinary motivation before committing themselves to prayer, reflection, worship, or spiritual reading. Yet transformation rarely occurs through occasional dramatic experiences. More often, it develops through small daily practices repeated faithfully over time. Just as physical strength is built through consistent training, spiritual strength grows through regular habits. A few minutes of sincere prayer every day can have a greater long-term impact than occasional bursts of enthusiasm that quickly disappear. The fourth step is seeking wise guidance. No one was designed to navigate life entirely alone. Mentors, spiritual directors, trusted clergy, mature friends, and wise counselors provide perspectives we cannot always see ourselves. They help identify blind spots, offer encouragement, and provide accountability. Throughout history, growth has almost always occurred within relationships rather than isolation. Pride insists on self-sufficiency. Wisdom recognizes the value of guidance. The fifth step involves evaluating the influences shaping your mind and heart. Modern people consume enormous amounts of information every day. Entertainment, social media, news, advertising, and digital content constantly compete for attention. Every influence leaves an impression. Some strengthen virtue, wisdom, and clarity. Others encourage cynicism, selfishness, confusion, or despair. It is worth asking whether the voices occupying the most space in your life are helping you become better or pulling you further away from your highest calling. Removing harmful influences and replacing them with healthy ones can produce dramatic results over time. Finally, there is the question of purpose. Many people drift because they lack a clear sense of direction. They react to circumstances rather than living intentionally. Yet human beings were created for more than survival. They were created for meaning. They were created to love, to serve, to grow, and to become the people they were designed to be. When purpose becomes clear, many distractions lose their power. Difficulties remain, but they are approached differently because they are viewed within a larger framework. The reason messages like this resonate with so many people today is simple. Beneath all the noise, confusion, and competing opinions, people are hungry for truth. Not a truth designed merely to make them comfortable. Not a truth adjusted to fit cultural trends. They want something solid. They want something real. They want guidance that acknowledges danger without surrendering to despair. They want hope grounded in reality rather than wishful thinking. Most importantly, they want to know that healing, freedom, and transformation remain possible despite everything they have experienced. And the good news is that they are possible. The path may be challenging. It may require honesty, sacrifice, humility, and perseverance. Yet countless people have walked it before. Countless people are walking it now. The invitation remains open to anyone willing to take the first step.